Pokemon fans, Tamashii here. I've been on a bit of a roll with lists ranking characters lately, so I figured, why not take on one last request before I move on to more glitch videos and beta secrets? A list ranking all the champions. Since of course there have only been 6 champs over the years, this list will simply rank all 6 from worst to best in my own humble opinion. Champions are the closest thing to a final boss in Pokemon games, not counting hidden champions like Red, and as such there's a lot riding on them. Champions have to be the payoff to what the entire game is centered around building up, collecting badges, so they have to be a fight worth remembering. How do our 6 champs manage this task? Let's find out. Number 6, Diantha. Diantha is interesting to me, because not only did she have 5 prior champs to compete with, she was also one of the first glimpses we got of X and Y during all the pre-release hype. She had a lot of expectations to live up to, both in terms of what a champion's role in the game should be, and what players were expecting of her based on her design when that was one of the only things we knew about X and Y. And design-wise, she's actually really interesting, and it fits the region and theme of X and Y quite well. She was obviously inspired by Audrey Hepburn, who is a famous European actress that starred in several films set in Paris. Even Diantha herself is a movie star in Kalos, so she had a lot of potential to do something really unique and interesting. But unfortunately, since the story of X and Y is so blah, she really didn't end up having too terribly much to do, which left her the least developed of all the champions. She just shows up a couple times, says some vague things about beauty and friendship, and doesn't leave much of an impression. Poor Diantha really got the short end of the stick writing-wise, and never really had much of a chance to live up to the hype. At least she has a full team in her final battle, which shockingly none of the other Kalos Elite Four members have. But her Pokemon seem to be picked based on aesthetic rather than strength, so she doesn't end up putting up much of a fight. Though aesthetically she's one of the best looking champs and has some really great music, she ends up being a really weak ending for one of the shallowest games in the series. Fitting for Gen 6 as a whole, she looks great but lacks substance. Number 5, Lance. For a game that was designed to be a climax to the Pokemon series, Lance made a lot of sense as a champion. He was the final Elite Four member in the Gen 1 games, so the only logical step up from there would be to make him the champ in the sequel. Lance was also the first champion to show up along the player's journey and help them along, acting as a mentor and building up their character before the final fight. Lance helped build our perception of what champions are meant to be in Pokemon games today, and he wasn't a bad start either. He works well as a character, and his Pokemon do happen to be some of the more powerful Pokemon available at the time, so he works as a final boss too. But compared to more complex characters and more complex games later down the line, Lance just doesn't rank that high for me. And I do have a minor nitpick concerning his team as well. He was supposed to be the Dragon-type champion, but the only typing his Pokemon actually have in common in Gold and Silver is Flying, and the only Dragon type he has on his team is Dragonite. He has 3 Dragonites, and not a single Kingdra, which is the only other Dragon-type Pokemon available in Gen 2. Also, literally every single Pokemon on his team knows Hyper Beam. At the time, this was all fine, since they were at least some of the most intimidating Pokemon in the game, but his team is a little silly in hindsight. Number 4, Alder and Iris. Alder would have made a fantastic champ in most games, but in Gen 5's massive cast of characters, he gets a little lost in the crowd, not helped by the fact that he can only be battled at all the second time you challenge the Elite Four. He shows up plenty, plays an active role in the story, and has an interesting team combination, complete with a beastly Volcarona. While Black and White was just so phenomenal at developing everyone else, Alder feels forgettable by comparison. Actually, to me, he's more memorable in the sequel, Black and White 2, when he isn't even champion anymore, simply because his son is the final boss of the Unova Challenge. Similarly, Iris suffers from a lot of the same problems. She was only a gym leader at all in White version. In Black, the final gym leader was Drayden, and it seemed kind of like a coin toss as to who got to be the final gym leader and who got to become champ in the sequels. Consequently, this gave Drayden a much bigger role than Iris in Black and White 2, in spite of being further down the pecking order. So you don't get to know her much more than you did in the original Black and White, in which all of her dialogue is about Team Plasma and the lore of Reshiram and Zekrom, and not herself. Thankfully, if you do happen to use the memory link in Black and White 2, she gets fleshed out a lot more in some flashbacks, and her relationship with Drayden is quite sweet, so she holds up a little better than Alder overall. And personally, her battle is pretty memorable to me because she's basically Nyan Cat. Cat ears? Check. Pop-Tart dress? Check. Space backdrop? Check. Techno music? Check. Though Gen 5 overall still by far has the best character development of any Pokemon game, it certainly felt like the champions got upstaged a little by everyone else. Number 3, Blue. Coming in exactly 1 spot higher than he did on the last list I did, Blue is in this spot for many of the same reasons he was ranked where he was last time. Being the very first rival and champion, Blue got to try things that no other champ has since, playing 2 roles at once. Being able to battle the champ throughout the game multiple times made his final battle quite a shock. He was always pretty over level compared to the other trainers in the area no matter where you fought him, but it was a surprise to find that his Pokemon managed to jump 10 levels between battling him right outside Victory Road and battling him inside the Indigo Plateau. And of course, the final battle with him was a great payoff in ways other champs never were, because you got to see how he built his team over time, starting with the level 5 starter at the very beginning of the game, and culminating in the group of the toughest Pokemon in the game by the very end. Having the rival take the champ slot before you and act as the final boss was very satisfying, but also something I'm glad they haven't done again since, because man, would it be predictable and boring 6 gens on. But for the first game, it worked perfectly, and made for one of the most memorable battles in Pokemon history. Number 2, Steven and Wallace. In general, I think part of what works most about all the characters in Hoenn is that the region is just small enough that it feels like a community. Most of the characters link back to another in some way, and almost every major character has some kind of family tie. Steven, for example, is the son of the president of the Devon Corporation, the company responsible for Pokeball manufacturing in Hoenn, among other gadgets and products. This helps build Steven up throughout the story, as almost all of your interactions with him involve swapping Devon Corp materials, whether it's a letter from his father or the Devon Scope. But that's not all there is to him. Ruby and Sapphire were the first games to have global stakes, so his involvement in helping you save the world made him a more important mentor figure than other previous champions. He wasn't just helping you along, he was a hero in his own right. Following Lance, who had 2 games to flesh himself out, Steven still managed to be a more developed character in 1 game alone. Steven has a unique hobby, collecting rare stones, and this is built both into his design and his Pokemon team. Unfortunately, this does take away from the challenge some, since his team is much less balanced than other champs, so as a final battle, his fight is probably the least memorable thing about him. Wallace took over for him in Emerald, graduating from final gym leader, and fortunately he ends up putting up a much better fight, if not a horrible, cheap, and frustrating one thanks to his double teaming Ludicolo. Both of these guys have style and flair, but there's one champ who tops them in almost every category. And the number 1 champion is Cynthia. Of all the champions, Cynthia's battle is by far the most challenging. Her team was well constructed, with lots of diversity, tough both offensively and defensively, and she got a massive level jump compared to all the other endgame trainers, making her one of the most satisfying champs to defeat simply because it was such a struggle for so many people. In terms of story, she's pretty similar to Steven. She does give herself a nice intro, you get a feel for who she is, and she even has a nice hobby of studying myths. But she doesn't really do an awful lot in Diamond and Pearl besides ask you about your Pokedex and help you get by some Psyduck. In Platinum though, her role is greatly expanded, and we actually get to see some of that mythical knowledge she has put into practice, aiding the player in saving the stability of the universe. She gets to participate in the action much more than any other champion. Her characteristics have a better payoff in that they're actually put into use, and the fact that her team packs much more of a punch than any other champion definitely puts her a rank above the rest. Undeniably, Cynthia has the best air built up around her, from her style to her team to her unique interests. And of all the champions, she's hands down the best at her job, earning her the number 1 spot. So there you have it, the best and worst Pokemon champions. Just a reminder, I'm uploading slightly less frequently just for a little bit, but I'll be back to my normal uploading schedule soon, which is twice a week. In the meantime, please check back regularly if you don't want to miss a video, because the less frequently I upload, the less my videos will get sent to your subscription boxes. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see my top best and worst rivals, you can click here. Or if you want to see my top 10 gym leaders, you can click here. As always, don't forget to click here to subscribe for more Pokemon videos. See ya!